what I wanted to just go on and talk about, though, was just how we ascertain whether these things are true or not. Because it's just something that's really, I think it's really very interesting to just to notice that how the clients feel about it too. Because very often a client will tell a story like this, and even they won't believe it. You know, oh yeah, I've told you all that, but I just don't believe it. Just at the conference that I was speaking at a couple of weeks ago, the 9th Global Buddhist Conference. This subject came up. I was with a group of people who I want to tell you a little bit about. This Dharma Ruin, who was on first too. But then I had a physicist after me who was talking about psychic things. But I gave the example at the conference that I'd just like to give to you again here today of a client that I had. He was a doctor. I didn't sort of say this at the conference, but I'll sort of tell you a little bit more about this client now, because no one here will know the person. Very good meditator, as a lot of my clients are. As you'd probably realise, I get a lot of people from the Buddhist community coming to me. But he was having, I won't go too far into this, but he was having trouble with his sexuality, let's just say. He was he was living a normal life, married, children, but you know, had issues with trying to understand his sexuality. And so we get into the story, and he starts telling me this really, really lurid story. It was you know, he was in a house. You could see it all very clearly. He went very clearly into a trance. You could see this little house in England, you know, maybe 200 years ago or more, coming home to a wife. The way he described his wife is such a beautiful woman, even with a bonnet, even, you know, little bonnet on and sort of dress, you know, pretty wife, and white in the kitchen, all that sort of thing. And then he started a story with the luridity came into it when he realised what he was doing, and he's lying there on the chair and he's kind of saying, you know, this is just bullshit. This is bullshit. His conscious mind was sort of coming in all the time to sort of, and I'm sort of saying, you know, okay, and I understand that. Don't worry about that. Just tell me what you're seeing. Just explain what you're seeing. Oh no, but I don't. It's just bullshit. So he finishes the story, and even afterwards, after even going through the subconscious part, he still was very, very doubtful about what he was saying. He's obviously, you know, as a doctor, he's probably, you know, the scientific method would be quite strong, I imagine, in him, and you know, these sorts of things are, you know, they're pretty shocking, really, when you, and certainly the story that he was telling, it wasn't, you know, a nice story. But the story at least did explain the questions that he came with in really quite a remarkable way. So after when we're debriefing in the end, you know, I said to him about, you know, you don't really believe the story then? And he said, no. He said, there's one thing that bothers me. He said, right the way through that whole session, he said, I had a nimitta with me. I don't know, does anyone here know what a nimitta is? Not really. A nimitta is something that happens in meditation when you start to get very, very still. The mind, when you get to this sort of still part, the mind starts to, in my terms, the way I explain it is it starts to become unstable. It's actually ready for a change of energy level, really. And it will, the energy level will change if you're able to stabilise the nimitta and sort of go deeper. But this nimitta is, you know, it appears sometimes in people as a sensation in their body, or it can also appear as like a light, or a kind of a that usually comes in from the side, like a white light. But it's very, it is sort of an instability. It feels like an instability, really, which it is. But it is an indication, though, that the mind is very still. The mind is very, very still, and it's sort of ready to, it is ready to sort of change level. If you can if this nimitta can be stabilised and gone through, a meditator will experience what we talk about is a jhana experience. You go into a jhana, the mind switches. Does it very quickly. When in a situation like this, and there's just pure mind sitting there, it's a process where the body and the body and all the hindrances of the body just sort of drop right away, if you can go through it. But that nimitta, though, is an indication that someone is very, very close to the present moment. Very close, and in my terms, very close to truth, very close to reality. So I found it's very interesting that that when you've got say a man like this, who knows a little bit about meditation, not really believing, his own story, and really can't believe it, not being able to believe it. And just with that, I wanted to sort of bring in another story that I heard from the physicist that was talking with me at this conference. His name was Bernard Carr. He's actually a friend of our abbot at Bodhinyana Buddhist Monastery, friend of Ajahn Brahm. I guess a lot of people here would have heard of Ajahn Brahm. But Bernard Carr, he trained under Stephen Hawking. He's a very, very well-respected physicist. He trained under Stephen Hawking. So what have I written? He's a cosmologist. He's a cosmologist. Studied with Ajahn Brahm at Cambridge. He worked under Stephen Hawking at Cambridge. But he had a psychic research group. Bernard's a bit of an unusual physicist in that way. He kind of keeps his mind open to psychic phenomena. Has done all his life, apparently. But anyway, he, as I've written here, he said, belonged to a psychic research group, and they invited physicists to an experiment on the so-called power of the mind. So they did this experience at Imperial College in London. It's in the research documents. So what he told them all, he said that they intended to levitate a vase of flowers. They were going to get these physicists around the table to levitate a vase of flowers. And the group had to sit around the table, and they were told to hum and chant. And they were asked to check for strings. They had to, check out, make sure the whole thing was all right, check for strings or anything that may be a trick. And the vase actually did levitate. They had it set up. They had an electromagnetic device they'd kind of built into the table. It was all hidden, of course, but they could sort of switch this on, and the vase actually did levitate. But they had all these physicists around the table, the checked and everything like that. But some of the physicists at the table, around the table that were humming, they didn't agree that the vase would levitate. They just couldn't see the vase levitate. Some people did, but the vase was levitating. But these physicists were saying, no, it didn't levitate. It's not levitating. So this is kind of an indication of the power of perception, really. If you see what you want to see, and what you don't want to see, you can just leave it be. So I thought that was just a great experiment that Bernard was telling us about, and it's kind of there, I think, for all of us. We have our blind spots, we all do. Unable to sort of see or understand things that we don't understand, just being able to sort of wash them off. I know that vase just didn't levitate at all. So you get experiences like with my doctor there that's really quite sceptical about the whole thing. And I've had quite a few of those, I might say. And I might say that my experience is that I've had quite a few medical staff and people that are psychologists come along to do these sessions, and they're usually the best clients. Some of their past life memories are just amazing. Because I guess they've kind of got they've got issues that they know they're dealing with themselves, and they've got those issues very clearly identified. But just some of the past lives that we've been able to sort of work with and even sort of check up the results of them afterwards have been quite startling. But I did want to just bring you back to another one of my clients that I work with, where the results were quite amazing, really. Just nothing short of saying that. This guy was he was a CEO at one stage of a big mining company, and always got a suit down St George's Terrace. He's very good businessman, and is just sort of in his own business now. But he came along just as a curiosity, really. He didn't really necessarily believe or disbelieve in past lives. But he started off in his story, he was feeling a button on his coat, and then kind of he was expanded, it's a red coat, he's saying, I'm thinking, he's in England or he's in America or something like this. And then he started to sort of, explain this uniform and the feathers that he had, and the way that the polishing the buttons and looking after the uniforms, all this kind of thing. And I said to him, whereabouts are you? And he said, I'm here at Barracks Arch. It was here in about the 1850s in the square at Barracks Arch. And it turned out that he had something to do with, I guess it must have been logistics, because he was spending a little bit of time in an office that looked over a room that looked over the quadrangle. He could see soldiers parading and things like that. And he even had he must have lived nearby, probably somewhere around Leederville, or he didn't really tell me that address, but it was close enough for him to walk home for lunch. But he was able to tell me his name, his wife's name, his children's names, and various other things about this person's life. And because he's quite a can-do person, he was able to go to the Batty Library and check on the things that he'd been telling me, and it just, the life just sort of fell out of the records like a stone. It was just all there. Really quite extraordinary. It was just things like even what he did afterwards. There was a story of being in the fort down at Albany for a time, and then leaving the army to become a soldier settler or a settler, in a place. In fact, we did subsequent work together where I even went down with him one weekend to sort of see how he reacted when he got to this farmer's house. And actually, it was a funny little story, even that, when we got there, because he was looking for this house and he had it all sort of set out the way that it should be, with how the stones should be and the rest of it, and it was in this particular place. And when and he knew the family too, so we'd rang this person, and he had rang this person and asked them about this house. He said, "Oh yes, there is but there was a sort of a hesitancy with this farmer." It was really a funny little thing. He's saying, and then he made up this story. He said, "Well, we're from we're at the university, and I'd like, a friend of mine wants to come down. We're doing some architectural research on sort of old buildings. We'd like to just come down and have a look at that building." He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "It's not much of a building. It's just all, it's all just a few rocks and that left there now." But when we did get to this building with the farmer sort of joined us. It was it clearly wasn't the same building, or wasn't even sort of the same, but there was something really fishy about what was going on with the farmer. He was sort of saying, this is all nonsense, all this stuff. All the heritage want to do this and the heritage want to do that. But as it turned out, he'd actually bulldozed another house, which was the house that we were looking at, which I can tell you about in a minute. But he bulldozed it into the creek. So even the stones and everything were all just sort of bulldozed away. So, this farmer didn't, of course, he was a bit nervous that if we were with heritage or someone like that, we were going to be chasing him up. But this man, eventually was able to get an old dollar map and find where the house was, and it was sort of right, just exactly right and orientated too in the way that he was saying that it was. So, you know, there you have kind of remarkable stories, really, of you know, of where the whole thing it certainly does ring true. And there's sort of everything in between. And I might say, in saying that too, I mean, I don't want to hold out to you that I kind of have brilliant success with every client that I have. You know, it's often a very mixed blessing that I get in my practice. Sometimes, you know, I feel the same way with meditation. Every session that I do, I never think they're wasted. I think they're all, you know, they've all got benefit for the person too, even if they're a little bit disappointed with what's happened. But you know, I think the whole process of, you know, just astounds me really, the amount of times, you know, even if I think it hasn't, you know, the session hasn't been that good, but you'll sort of see the person a couple, you know, that session I did with you, know, this happened, that happened, and you know, it sort of opens up sort of many things. So the catharsis that sort of takes place in these, in the telling of these stories, is really quite palpable. I'll just tell you one other little quick story too, just where catharsis is really high on the agenda there, and I'm just a bit nervous that sort of talking about this 10-year-old girl on the telly. I don't know what that was about, that girl there. I hope it wasn't anything like my story here with that one. I never heard about that, but my wife had a kinesiology client, and she suspected that this young girl might have had a past life experience. She was there with a mother, and they actually booked in a session with me. It was, because this girl was very ill. She'd had this sore stomach, and for 2 years, you know, she'd been involved in having Panadol, and massive amounts of Panadol now each day, up to I don't know how many she was having, but drinking Panadols to control this pain in the stomach. And it was, you know, she'd been, of course, you know, everywhere medically, and no one could sort of help her. So, you know, Heidi suggested maybe they might want to do a session. So I think she might have been 13 or 14. I know that I didn't have a police clearance, I haven't got one of those. So, but, you know, I was happy to do, as long as the mother was sitting in there with me, which she did. The mother came up and sort of sat in the session with me. So she was sort of, you know, making sure everything was kosher. And this girl really told a remarkable story about this life that she could, just in the trance, she could sort of see herself in this house in the bush with pigtail little curls, and you know, in a mirror, and a bedroom in a 2-storey farmhouse, and the farm and the trees. You know, it was really a little idyllic thing that she was painting. And then she talked about this time sitting on a fence, and this man was coming, and you could feel in her, just feel the doom coming, the kind of. And this man was walking along, and she didn't really express straight out just what was on. She would have been well aware her mother was sitting there too, so no doubt there was some. You know, she was probably censoring herself to some extent. But it was very clear what had happened to the girl, and she'd been raped and murdered and then left in the bush. And her mother in that life had actually come and found her in the bush. And when I asked her afterwards, you know, whether this did relate to the pain in the stomach, she said yes, it did. And sort of using Rick's old tricks, you know, so I sort of asked her, well, how long was it going to take? First of all, can you fix this? Can the subconscious mind fix it? And she said yes. And so we went through that process, and she said it might take some months, but it would be fixed. Now, as it turned out, I had her auntie came to me 3 weeks later with just the same kind of incredible story from the auntie. Well, not this, but just she had her, you know, her own past life story that was just quite a remarkable story too. But she told me that 3 weeks later, you know, I asked how this girl was going, and she said that she was now off the Panadols. So it's just astonishing, isn't it? You kind of get these cathartic kind of processes that happen that are really quite amazing. So, I think that's probably all I was just going to say about believability, but I wanted to just go on and just talk about another thing that I've kind of noticed in the processes that I do, the way that I work, in the way that what makes a story true or not. And what I've found is that when somebody's emotionally connected to the story as well as intellectually connected, it's then when belief really is there for the person, when they can really believe it. Like at the conference I was sort of saying, you can have someone, they'll be telling you a story and you can sort of tell that they're confabulating, they're just kind of going through the motions of a story and sort of walking along, and there's a shack up there and there's someone at the window, and then you can just sort of see it all, just quite, they're just quite ordinary stories, and then all of a sudden it'll be, I've been shot, or there's a knife in me, I'm just using Dolores's method. I'm just thinking now of one man that came up from Bunbury, again with a sort of a sore stomach area. And God, it was just so difficult with him. I was nearly at the end of my 3 hours really with him, just trying to get him to say a story. What can you see? Oh, it's just black, just black, just black.
So what do you do when all they say is they see black?
Yeah, see black, yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a few techniques here, because usually that's kind of, they're blocking it off, or I quite often use the heart, to get them to put their hands on their heart and then sort of do a bit of loving kindness and, open up to this story, feel the love coming through, just, like that, and just so that they can actually feel what's happening. That often is quite a good technique, really, just to get people to open up.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work and you kind of get to the end of the session, what do you do?
Well, not much you can do, really, is there? You just I usually, at the end of a session like that, I would usually just go to the subconscious mind too, and then just sort of finish the session with what did the blackness mean? Just again, not trying to interpret or do anything for the client, but just to to leave the ball in their court and let them try and understand what it means. Why was there blackness there? Do
you think that's fair? That it maybe makes them only see blackness or something? Like, is that why they're blocking themselves?
Well, you can certainly ask all around that, just what is it, and then if it's possible to work with them again afterwards, you would certainly do that, just to... But oftentimes, though, it is, I'm quite convinced it is because, there isn't anything there that somebody would want to speak about. Some people have ideas that they would want to sort of talk about past lives and that, but oftentimes I think that there just isn't that. But whenever I kind of get someone like that, though, I'm always sort of cognizant that they might be coming more for a deeper sort of spiritual connection, which is what I'll sort of go on to talk about in a minute, which is really where I lead those sort of people into a more conscious, understanding their consciousness more. So
it's it could be them either blocking it, it could be a bit of fear, and maybe they may not have had a past
life. Yeah.
Or maybe they're not meant to know now.
Maybe they're not meant to know now, that's exactly right, just not the right time. But it's important, though, not to let the person walk out with a, feeling guilty or a blame, but equally I don't want to feel that either. It's just the way that it is. It's like, any meditation session, they're all good sessions, they're just different, yeah. Where was I talking? What was I on about? I was going... I was
the spirituality side of it. Some people come from that.
Yeah, that's right. They, if they just see black. Yeah, I was talking about this guy from Bunbury. That's right. Yeah, that's what he was just seeing black, But it just goes to show when you sort of stay with someone for a while, because I would have been with him for maybe an hour and a half. I was just getting so tired, can you just look at he's quite okay, the people in the trance don't seem to worry, but not only that, I've noticed that they even get annoyed sometimes, people will get annoyed for you to, what are you seeing, what can you can see them, they're saying, shut up, get out of my dream, But if you don't kind of keep them focused, you can't get anything down on the tape, and they don't really know it is just like a dream. They're not, they're not able to sort of bring it out into the external.
So sometimes people don't want to kind of tell you what's going on because they're too invested in what is going on.
Yeah, well, whatever it is anyway. But sometimes they resent you kind of interfering with their ideal. Anyway, this guy, just suddenly out of the blue, I'm seeing black, and he said, I'm rocking. And then I said, tell me more, you're rocking. He said, I'm in a hammock, I'm on a ship, and he could hear the creaking and then everything, and then it would happen very, very fast after that too. He just said, now I'm on an island, and I'm on an island and there's fighting going on. There's people over there and they're fighting, and the ships are over there and there's fighting here. And, I got a spear. There's a spear in the stomach, like a spear. And then he's kind of, goes through this process of a death on the beach. There's still fighting going on. He said he could still hear and see the fighting going on, the ships all over. But again, another opportunity for a catharsis, because he'd come with this pain in his stomach originally. So, the past lives, they're very, very interesting and, I think healthy for people. This is really why I like past lives, because I think in a way that they are truthful. They're kind of but they're good. They're a good thing to believe in. I mean, I don't know what a belief is. I think beliefs are a bit, beliefs stink a bit, really. You can believe in any old thing, really. Even good things, but a belief is just that, it's a belief. It means you don't really know. You kind of got maybe a construction of ideas around some particular thing, but you're not really talking about knowing it in the moment, or knowing it with awareness in the moment. So a belief is always a bit of a sort of a ropey thing to sort of have. But if you're going to have a belief, I think past lives are a terrific belief to have, because it's, I think it connects us with the next generation, it connects us with everybody else. It means that we don't just normally think, I'm 67 now, I'm not too much longer for this life, I'll just sort of get out in time before climate change happens, and things like that. It just makes you more responsible, I think, you can sort of see that you don't escape. You are going to come back, so you can put your best efforts into sort of doing the best that you can.
Can I just ask, I know very little about Buddhism, but I understand that possibly sometimes you come back as what you deserve to come back as, like a cockroach if you're being nasty. So, do you ever get people in past lives that have come back from that and reaching Buddha more because they've come back from being a cockroach because they were pretty bad, and then they've been a good cockroach and they've come along to be, it sounds silly, but that they then come back to goodness?
Well, yeah, you do get people that have got, that sometimes have animal stories. I'm not really quite sure about those myself. I mean, everything I get, I just take on face value. I never judge it anyway. I just kind of try to let it come. But I certainly have had people who feel that they were a dancing bear, or, feel the pain. But I don't know if that's necessarily, true, or whether they're just projecting into. But whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. So I've had a lot of people like that with different ideas of animal existence in the past. I haven't had a cockroach though yet. It's just
Along the same lines, I just lost it. Sorry, I'm off somewhere else. Wait till it comes back.
All right. Well, yeah, because I realise that the time's going on anyway. But I wanted to just sort of move on to a subject too, just about consciousness, really. And this is some work that I've been doing. Before I finish that, though, I should really just mention some other things about truth in past life, because I don't know. Does anyone know Professor Stevenson? Anyone heard of him in connection with past lives? It's a travesty, actually, that we don't really know a lot about some of these very important people that have lived. Professor Stevenson was did some work in, which university was it? It was one of the big universities in back in 1949 anyway, he got a grant to study past lives. From all others, it was from Rang Xerox, the copier people actually gave him the grant. But he followed past lives and had a remarkable life, really, working with past lives right through to when he died just a few years ago. So from 1945, I think he first started, up until 6 or 7 years ago. Probably his work is very dense and very scientific. The way that, because what he used to do, he'd have people around the world that would sort of give him an idea of, this little girl has just told him to. He used to study children in the main. This little girl has just told a story about a past life. He used to work with the Druze people a lot in the Middle East, but in India and even in the United States too. He had lots of people, so he'd be there and he would try to get with the families before there was too much cross-contamination or anything like that, because that would obviously rule out any scientific method being able to be applied to his work. And he. Well, he just did some remarkable work in in proving that when you read the thousands and thousands of case histories that he's actually uncovered, and it's sort of crystallised in I suppose the main book that he's known for is a book called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. Even the title that he has in the end is sort of still couched in the scientific world. But those 20 cases are certainly quite remarkable cases of children. But he used to find, though, that people would even bring through memories of past life on their skin. So, like if somebody had been fairly heavily disfigured at death, that mark would come through. And he'd been able to sort of do work looking at post-mortems and things like that, with bullet wounds and marks that people had said they were this person, finding a mark on their skin just like that, or some other disfigurement in the way that they work. But anyway, I would thoroughly recommend you kind of look into Professor Stevenson's work, because it's being carried on too now. It's the University of Virginia that he's from, and quite remarkable work, and really not that much known about it either. But then there's other things I was going to mention too. Just Peter Ramster's film that he made about 30. I'm just speaking before about this film that I taped off the telly 30 years ago, and it had these 4 women in there. He reckons that he chose these 4 women out of 1,000 people that he'd hypnotised. That sort of figures with my work around about too. About 1 in 200, I reckon, are kind of, you get an example where you might be able to sort of test it out. But he made this film. It was a remarkable film about these 4 women that he took back to Europe. These women had never left Australia. They didn't really, did all the testing and whatever else with it. But just the film's on my website if you're interested to look at it. It's there in 11 parts. Now, happily, I did tape it, and I've got it on my. It's got digitised now too, but happily, it's on the web. But it's on the web in these 11 parts, so you can watch it in little 10-minute blocks. But it's just a remarkable film. Either he totally fabricated the whole lot, or you just have to. Anyone that didn't believe in past lives would just have to open up to have a little look at it, because it's just so remarkable. There's one woman there, Cynthia. He first started to. He actually had a different life for her that he actually went back and investigated. She lived in a French chalet that he found. But before that, she'd spoken of a life as a black slave. So that wasn't in the film, but I've just sort of followed Peter Ramster a little bit since. He's got a few DVDs on the web that he's made about this. But he's from Sydney, and certainly certainly done some remarkable work with past lives anyway. And the other lady I was just going to mention is, I don't know, has anyone heard of a lady called Jenny Cockell? Haven't heard those stories? Because they're really quite famous stories in the... Jenny Cockell, she's a... Cockell, yeah, she lives in Northamptonshire. She's a little bit younger than me, mate. Sorry? Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah, that's the one. She remembered a life as Mary Sutton. She didn't actually know the name herself, though, but she actually ended up getting into the whole story because she knew that there was something dreadful in her life, you know, and she knew that she'd had a lot of children, but she knew there was something dreadful, and she had some hypnosis and found that she'd died in childbirth with a 7th child, and it was in Ireland. But she'd had enough information that she was able to go back and find the house, find the family too, and because you know she knew because the husband in that life was a bit of a wastrel. He used to beat her, so he knew that he wasn't going to look after the children. So I think it was this sort of pull to these children that she always wanted to be with, and she ended up finding these, and the oldest boy, I think his name was Sonny. She had a particularly close relationship to. I think he was about 16 when she died. But there was quite remarkable work that she's done. She's written books about this. I think there's even been a film made about her. But with her, she was actually even able to tell the family, the living family, that they had another sibling. And no one even knew. But she was able to sort of say. So really, quite a remarkable woman. It seems that people like that, people like her, Jenny Cockell, seems to be very good at being able to do past lives, because she could remember another life in Japan as well. It seemed to be, just as remarkable, really. So, there are quite a lot of these sort of stories and things out there for us to try and to get our heads around. Just with is everybody okay with time? Are you still with me, or are you?
Short question.
Yeah.